So it's been about a year that we've had this hose reel up. I'm going to get into how I made it out of some scraps I had laying around and putting together the Eley hose reel. I really like these hose reels. They're connectors. They work well and they've definitely lasted. So let's go ahead and get into it. Doing this project has taken longer than I expected as usual. Before I got the idea to go ahead and record this, I had already gotten started and said, hey, thought it would be a good idea to take a little documentary of my process here and put it together, and not only would I have it, but I'd be able to kind of show other people the process of a simple project like this. I want to say this took me a few hours. Most of it was digging in the ground because we have clay soil, if you can even call it soil, and it's got a lot of rocks in it usually, so it really makes digging a big pain in the butt. I had probably already spent 30 minutes digging that other hole, and I had decided not to pre-build this. I was just gonna kind of start with one hole and build it from there, check the spacing and go from there, because it would be inevitable that I would build it and then dig the holes and something would be off or out of whack. So I just went one piece at a time. This was the harder way of doing this, I'm sure, but it's how I did it. And would I do it differently? Yeah, but as you see when I go through this process, I'm going to redo a couple of things, because as I was doing it, I realized that wasn't the best way of doing it. And sometimes that's all part of the process. So here I'm just lining things up with the actual hose reel mount to make sure that I got everything spaced out properly. Try and make sure I can get it level because I didn't want them coming out of the holes that I dug in like a V shape. Make sure I got them deep enough. I don't know how far down I went, maybe 20 inches, 24 inches. It wasn't all that deep, but it was deep enough that this has not been an issue. Like I said, we've been, when I'm recording the audio for this, this video is probably about a year old. I wanted to see how this was going to last, see if we'd have to redo anything. It's worked. It's worked great, even though it's only 2x4s. It's what I had laying around, which was some scrap. Just wanted to use what I had on hand. So there are pressure treated 2x4s. Normally if you do this, you'd probably want to use 4x4s. We'll see a little bit later where I had some problems with the lag bolts, and I had to add some extra material to the back of these. But what I did is I had a lot of this pea gravel laying around, poured it in the hole, tamped it down really hard. Because of that clay soil, it really locks it in there. And I just used the water to help settle everything down and pack it in. I didn't want to cement it because, I knew, for one, the soil was probably going to be enough, and I may have to redo it later. So this was just to get the hose reel up, get it functional, be able to start using it on this side of the house. I already have one on the other side. It's actually attached right to the side of the house, which is brick, and it works fantastic. But this is by the driveway. We had a little plastic hose reel that was just one of those cheap things that you get from like Walmart or something like that. And it finally broke. I ordered another Eley hose reel because, these are absolutely fantastic hose reels. They are expensive, but, you're not going to fight with it. You're not going to fuss with it. Retrospectively, I might have, been a little better off in this location getting the cart version. With this being angled the way it is, it made it really easy to pull it out, to use the hose, and to get it around that entire side of the yard. So, I'm really happy with it. Here we are just putting it together. This is, I think, what they call their parallel installation. You can do it two different ways: by rotating the part that attaches to the back bracket. It'll either stick straight out in like a perpendicular mode, or in this way it'll be a parallel mode. So here I am just mocking everything up, making sure it's level. I'm trying to clamp it. It didn't really work that great, but I want to make some lines so I can cut this thing off just above where I need it, and I want them to be even. Again, I'm digging holes in clay. I didn't know if I was going to get the holes perfectly even. So this way I dig the holes, I put the post in, I mark a level line on top of it, and then I cut them off. I'm up against the house, so this skill saw, or the circular saw rather, Didn't really work up against the house, but I love this little saw. It's a left-hand saw, I think is what you call it. So I can actually see better what I'm doing instead of kind of looking over at the line or trying to see the front of the line. It makes it a little tough to balance sometimes since I'm right-handed, so I'm so used to cutting that right-hand side off. But when I'm trying to, you know, just kind of freehand stuff, watched a framer, I forget what his name is, but he was a pretty big deal back in the 90s. He did a bunch of framing videos. He used a left-hand worm drive, and he'd just hold, you know, the piece of lumber up and cut it right off because he could see it, and he didn't have to try to hold it and hold the saw and look around it. I just find it works a lot better for that type of kind of running gun, quick cut type of stuff where you're not really maybe putting it on a table and lining it up. So the first piece I just kind of eyeballed the cuts. I cut them off. They looked terrible. So I'm going back and trying to cut them a little bit more deliberately and a little bit more evenly. And you'll find that, you know, even this doesn't work out quite right. But I do repurpose this piece later after going through this. So this is version 2 of the cap for the top of the post. And we'll move on, unfortunately not too far from here, to version 3. So here I am getting the old one off, and you can see there I just kind of tried to taper them down, but it was too much taper. And then ultimately I didn't like using screws right in the top of it. You know, trying to toenail it from underneath didn't work. Because there really wasn't a whole lot to grab onto. So I move on to these screws that I got for this decorative umbrella stand that we built for our back porch. They're kind of like finish nails, but in screw form for putting down like deck boards and stuff like that. And they work really great, and they surprisingly grip pretty well. They've got like a counter twist on the top of them that helps to like pull the wood tight down to whatever you're working on, like if it was 5/4 board or something like that. So here we go with version 3. I wanted a wider top. Speaking of 5/4 board, I had some of this laying around. The downside here is that I will end up having to cut this piece a little bit different angle where it goes up against the house because it is wider. But in the end, this came out looking so much better. So same process, just cutting the corners off, running the screws back down, getting everything trimmed up like it needs to be, and it comes out really great. We don't have great pressure here. We're on a well. The well capacity is limited, and I think our well is only pushing 5 gallons a minute, with our well only recovering at 1 gallon a minute. We don't have a whole lot, so getting a ton of flow out of the end of spray head isn't of the utmost importance. If it is, you probably don't want to use, you know, shut off on the end of your hose because that's going to restrict it down a little bit. This is the part I alluded to earlier where a 4x4 would have been a better choice, and I had to make up some blocks. So here I'm taking the scrap piece of wood that I had after changing the cap for the second or third time, I guess, depending on how you're counting it. Cutting off little blocks just to go behind the lag bolts that go through. Thought about using shorter lag bolts, but I just felt like these needed more grip. So I used what came with it, which was probably like somewhere between a 2 and 3 inch lag bolt. I would have had to get down to 1.5 inches at most for a shorter screw. And that was just going into a 2x4. So putting the backup blocks on there and then running that lag all the way through really helped to secure everything and make it a tight fit. Getting back to the water supply, all this water is going through a softener system anyway. Eventually I do want to replumb it so that we're getting water, you know, straight out of the well. That might help our flow rate a little bit better, but to be honest, I can't water the grass for more than like 10 or 15 minutes without draining the well. I want to say we get about, I don't know, what's it work out to? It set at 300 feet, 1.5 gallons per foot on a 4-inch well, I believe. We might have 400 gallons at our disposal, which if you're watering the grass, you go through 400 gallons really quick, believe it or not. I have a device on there that will shut it off. It's not the pressure switch. It actually looks at the current draw. If it sees that it starts free spinning and the load drops, it'll shut the well off for 30 minutes so that the well can start to recover some. For this part here, I'm going to start working on making a little holder. All of my attachments, whether it's a sprinkler or a couple of the spray heads that we have are quick connects. They're Eley quick connects. They work great. They're not shut off like an air hose where it's got like an internal mechanism where it shuts it off. But it does make switching from one to the other really easy. I don't lose seals. Again, I've been using these, I want to say at least a couple years now, because this hose reel is a year old. I've had the other one at least 2 or 3, maybe even 4 or 5 years now. I got it pretty quickly after we moved in here. We've been here since 2018. I've been using those quick connects. They work great. Got little shutoffs on the end of the hoses, so 9 times out of 10 we're not even going back to that main shutoff. We're just shutting it off at the end of the hose, and you flip-flop whatever piece that you need. Here you see I'm drilling the holes for all of my attachments to just sit at the bottom of this hose reel by the quick connect. So little quick connect, fitting, I want to say it's probably about 3/4 to 7/8 of an inch. Just drilled a couple holes in there that fit really well. Anyway, with our well, we've thought about re-drilling it. We have a neighbor who seems to do pretty well, but most of the folks in the neighborhood on the original wells don't seem to get the best performance out of them. I think we're probably the only ones that are having an issue where we'll run out of water, but it's not like everybody's watering their grass or anything like that. We had a sprinkler system hooked up. We've since started dismantling it and digging it up for various reasons. One being we just can't use it. This is the lead hose that they give you. I'll thread that through, get that hooked up, and then get my garden hose wrapped up on there as well. We're on our second well pump since we've owned this house, because we had a valve stick. I came home one night and it was really late. It was probably like 11 or 12 o'clock. I'd been on the road all day, and the valve had stuck, and I saw a sprinkler like just kind of leaking, and I was like, oh man, I'll deal with this later. What I didn't realize is it was going to just continue to drain the pump, and it locked the pump up, so I had to have another pump put in. We had one put in when we bought the house because they tried to drill the well a little bit deeper for a previous buyer, and they weren't able to get any more production out of it. I've often wondered if fracking would work well, but we just, we managed to deal with it. We don't really run into any issues. Here you can see, I goobered this one, with putting the elbow fitting on in the wrong direction so that it was trying to wind from underneath. And let me tell you, you can see me there, I was trying to mimic that. It wasn't going to work. You can't crank underhanded and really be that effective. You want to crank overhanded and have it pull from the top. So, I like to show that people make mistakes. It's just the reality of it. Here I am telling my father-in-law, what you heard at the very beginning on our title screen. Taking longer than I expected, as usual. Like most things, it takes longer than you think it's going to take, but I was just happy to get this done in one day.
All right, see how it works.
Get it all wrapped up. I've got this Craftsman rubber hose, which, I found a few years ago, and I was lucky enough to be able to get some more of it. I don't know if they still make it. It was actual, Sears Craftsman stuff at the time. And it works great. It doesn't bind up. It doesn't get twisted. There we have the finished product. Hit me up, subscribe, check out a couple other videos. I'll be making some more.